Stay tuned because for the next 60 minutes, Motorsports Unlimited is on the air. Hi, I'm Jerry Bryant, and these are the lovely ladies of motorsports. And all this hour, we're going to have 60 minutes of action-packed excitement. All kinds of exciting things will happen. And we got the famous Bill Wildt, and we got all kinds of other good stuff that's happening all this hour. Motorsports Unlimited, 60 minutes of non-stop action. So let's go to the studio right now, huh?
Thanks, Jerry, and hi, everybody. Welcome to the studio headquarters of Chicagoland's most watched, most talked about Access television series. I'm Samantha Bentley, and this is the 937th edition of Motorsports Unlimited. Today, we conclude our coverage of Bill's motorcycle adventure in the summer of 2004. If you'll recall, during the last 5 weeks, we've explained how Bill acquired a motorcycle, set it up for touring, then rode to upstate New York to visit his boyhood home. It was his first time back in 50 years, and while he thoroughly enjoyed the experience, the trip turned out to be way more than a motorcycle ride. Last week's show ended as Bill was beginning his ride back to Chicago. Let's join him as he reflects.
As you enjoy the beautiful upstate New York scenery with me, as I head for Buffalo, I'd like to express some of the feelings I was experiencing. Sam mentioned in the opening of today's show, this turned out to be more than a motorcycle ride, and it sure did. As a matter of fact, it turned out this adventure wasn't about a motorcycle ride at all. Let's see if I can explain. I've owned motorcycles most of my life. I got my first one when I was 13 years old. There was a law in Illinois back then that said you could ride a motorcycle between the ages of 14 and 16 if it was less than 5 horsepower. Of course, it didn't take us long to realize it wasn't that difficult back then to alter a title, so by the time I was 15, I had a Harley KHK. The title originally said 45 horsepower, and by carefully removing the 4, I had the required 5 horsepower machine. Over the years, I've enjoyed motorcycles in a variety of ways, mostly racing. In the first few episodes of this series within Motorsports Unlimited, titled Motorcycling Rediscovered, we detailed a road trip my high school friend Todd and I experienced some 40 years ago. It was a disaster. Terribly unreliable motorcycles, poor preparation, a fair amount of drinking, resulted in never seeing our destination and going home with our tails between our legs. One of the motorcycles destroyed because of crashes and my friend injured. We never went on an extended road trip again. Somewhere between 40 and 45, I kind of got out of motorcycling. I was too old and too injured and felt it was better left to the young guys.
The sign on the right is another one of those warnings for truckers. Very steep decline. When you see those in New York State, pay attention. I don't know how this looks on television, but this is very steep. It's quite a roller coaster.
I didn't think about it much for about 15 years. I was busy with boats and race cars and snowmobiles. Last summer I spotted a bike that reminded me of one of my favorite motorcycles from my youth, my A10 BSA. It had the same general layout and was also a 650, but it was a Suzuki with all the modern high-tech Japanese technology. I couldn't resist it. Was I trying to turn back the clock, or was it something else? After riding it for several weeks, gaining great confidence in it, I decided to take a trip I'd been thinking about for 50 years. A trip back to my boyhood home in upstate New York. If you've been watching every week, you already know all of this. What you may not know is I had trepidations about trying it. What made me think I could do something at 61 that I couldn't do at 21? I'm aware that most of the younger people watching this little series within Motorsports Unlimited aren't going to get it. They live in a different world, a world where you don't hurt when you get up in the morning. a world where you don't have to take heart medication on a daily basis. I think this account of my little adventure will only be of interest to those past 50, to those who wonder if it's still possible to experience the joys of youth, or is life only about limitations as you get older? I also had some concerns about what I might find of my boyhood home. It's been said, you can't go home again. Would it be better to keep the memories of my boyhood home memories? Will I be disappointed if nothing is left? I thought about all of these things as I rode east to upstate New York. Now, riding west, my visit over, it was time for reflection.
As you know, Bill kept a journal and jotted down things as they occurred to him. Hi, I'm Patty Borowitz. Let's listen as Janine reads Bill's comments from this part of the trip.
As I rode west, I reflected on what I'd experienced these past 2 days. Certainly the Palmentiers made the trip. It could have turned out quite differently if this family had been something different. When I stopped in the rain that night and announced, "My parents built this place over 50 years ago," the response could very easily have been, "So what?" Finding people like David, Denise, and Sam on the old homestead really made me feel good. I'm not sure why. I'll do some thinking about this, but it really made the trip. As I think about it, everyone I encountered was warm and gracious, from Richard Buffo, transmission repair, to Liz Brown, Cobleskill School Administrator. I have nothing but good feelings to carry back to Chicago. As I traveled toward Buffalo, I stopped again to get some helmet cam footage of the beautiful upstate New York scenery. As I was doing it, the day became colder and cloudy. My neighbors in Chicago suggested that since I was going through Buffalo, I should stop at Niagara Falls. I'll check into it tomorrow.
But first he had to get to Buffalo. He continued west.
The weather was certainly changing. Notice I've got gloves on now. There are occasional drops of rain in the air, and it's cold. Still, nothing seemed to spoil my enthusiasm for the upstate New York countryside. It's just beautiful. As I said last week, it's a shame you can't feel the elevation changes on television. Each night I reviewed the helmet cam footage, and while I was pleased with it, I could see the audience was not going to be able to tell just how steep these hills are. Each time you crest one of them, you feel yourself get lighter, and on the other side, it's a plunge down again. For someone who lives in an area that is very flat, this is a pleasure. I'm going to talk a little more about the trip later, but first I want to expand on what this really turned out to be about. Like everyone else who reaches the age of 60, I carry battle scars. I'm not complaining, I earned every one of them, but I want to explain my physical limitations. Years ago, I injured my back, and this manifested itself over the years to extreme pain in my hands, specifically my right hand. The little finger and the one next to it are numb, yet surprisingly painful. One would think if a portion of your hand is numb and had little sense of touch, you wouldn't feel anything. It's interesting that while I have little feeling in this portion of my hands, they're still very painful. My left hand isn't as bad as my right, but the feeling, or lack thereof, coupled with pain, is there, just to a lesser degree. In addition to this, 3 years ago, I suffered a heart attack and subsequent quadruple bypass surgery. Thanks to the wonderful doctors and staff at Gottlieb Hospital in Melrose Park, I came out of it feeling better than I have in years. I mention all this because I know there are many others out there who have become aware of physical limitations as they've gotten older. When you're young, you have a remarkable ability to heal, and, I think, conduct yourself accordingly. I had to give up motorcycle racing because the inevitable injuries became more and more difficult to recover from. When I started, whatever injuries I suffered over a weekend of racing was gone by Tuesday. As the years went by, I became aware that I hurt all the time. A minor get-off at speed in April was still hurting in October. I think nature expects us to get smarter and stop hurting ourselves as we get older because it takes away our recuperative powers. Anyway, I thought about all these things when thinking about making this trip. Was I inviting injuries I would probably never heal from? Would the pain in my hands and fingers be aggravated by the riding position on a motorcycle? Heck, I'm one of those people who gets sore muscles the first few days after driving a different car. And what about the heart problems? I felt great, but was I asking for trouble?
Once again, very, very steep.
What I'm getting at is, I'm sure I have the same physical limitations as most 61-year-old men out there. The question is, does that mean I'll have to live the rest of my life with limited ability to enjoy? Or are there possibilities? I thought about all these things when I embarked on this adventure. As we get older, it is sometimes depressing when we realize we will never again win another flat track motorcycle race. You can fill in your own sweet memory of youthful conquest, but one of mine was motorcycle flat track racing. I spent 1 year as an amateur and 5 as a professional. It was one of the sweetest parts of my life, but it's over. I'll never again get to carry the checker flag around Santa Fe Speedway on a victory lap. Never. Even if Santa Fe Speedway were still here. Never. I use this example as a defining moment in my life. Other racers will know what I mean. Perhaps for you it was football, or baseball, or, well, as I said, fill in your own defining moment. So if these were the sweetest of life's moments, and they are absolutely, positively gone forever, what now? A life without sweet moments? I discovered something very exciting on this trip, and I have great news for you. Not only are the sweet memories you crave not over, there are better ones ahead. When I started this trip, I didn't expect it to be life-changing. I expected a challenge based on my previous motorcycle touring experience. I won't go through it all again. You're supposed to watch every week. Now, come on. But I expected the motorcycle ride portion of my return home to be something I would endure, something to test my mettle, a little spice in life. After the first day, I was surprised to find out how much fun, no, make that joy, I was experiencing. I wasn't enduring anything. I was finding joy in the ride. I stopped thinking about the bike braking. The Suzuki was beyond confidence inspiring. It was awesome. The preparation was paying off. The windshield was preventing fatigue in a way I didn't think possible. The bags were charming me with their "we know what we're doing, even if you don't" capability. When I woke up after the first day's rest, I was astonished to find I didn't have a single sore muscle. Not one. My hands were no different than usual. I have no explanation for this, except to say, from the first moment I rode it, the Suzuki fit me like a glove. I began to realize by the third day of this adventure, I was discovering something. I wasn't sure quite what, but the joy of this road trip took me by surprise.
pretty cold and tired when he reached Buffalo, New York, so he went to bed, and in the morning was ready for another day.
Well, I'm back in Buffalo again. Arrived here last night, of course, but quite frankly, I was too frozen cold to shoot a piece last night. I decided I'd stay overnight and get warmed up a little bit. Start again today, although when I turned the TV on this morning, it was 56 degrees, and it's not expected to go above 65 today, so it's pretty cold up here. I've got one decision I've got to make here, and I haven't quite decided yet because I just asked the motel operator, and they say we're about 30 miles away from Niagara Falls. I've never seen Niagara Falls. It might be worth a side trip to do it. I've got to look at about how long this leg is today because if everything goes right today, I should be back in Toledo tonight and then the following day in Chicago. So I've got to look at that. Once again, having a really enjoyable time. Yes, it was cold all day yesterday. Like I say, I have seen heat, I have seen rain, I have seen cold, and quite frankly, it all contributes to the adventure. I'm in Buffalo right now, and I'm going to decide if I'm going to stop by Niagara Falls.
56 degrees? Wow, that is cold in August. When he came through Buffalo a few days ago, it was 90. It's a good thing Bill listened to Chicagoland Toys for Tots Motorcycle Parade President Cooch. Listen.
Oh, one more thing before I go. Cooch, thank you for reminding me about the leather coat. And I've got to tell you, I was cussing him out the first 5 days because the leather coat and also the gloves, I took gloves too, the leather coat and the gloves took up a fair amount of space in here, and I was cussing him out for the first 5 days when I was getting sunburned. And boy, I really appreciate the advice now. Thanks a lot, Cooch.
Let's check in with our own Janine Lauschat as she reads a few notes on this part of the trip from Bill's journal.
When I awoke in Buffalo on Saturday morning, Day 7, I stepped outside the motel room en route to the office to ask about how to get to Niagara Falls and was greeted with cold. August 7th, and it was cold. I went back into the room to check the weather on TV. 56 degrees. Damn, that's cold. Worse yet, the day was not going to get much better, and rain was expected. I half-heartedly went to the motel office for directions to Niagara Falls. Apparently, they hear the question often. They had a printed piece of paper with exact directions. 30 miles. I don't think so. It was cold. No, I mean cold. And an extra 2 hours in the cold with diminishing weather didn't sound like a good idea. I needed to make it back to Toledo, Ohio today, and if rain did materialize in any significant way, it would slow my progress considerably. Maybe next time. I must admit, I'd been cussing out Cooch, Chicagoland Toys for Tots Parade President Bob Kuchera, since the first day of the trip. He took the time to provide me with a complete list of what I needed to take. He's an experienced touring rider and camper. When I looked at the list, flashlight, spark plugs, and a million other things, I said to myself, he's probably right, but I'm not going to do all of this. I talked to him on the phone and he said, if nothing else, take a leather jacket and gloves. He was emphatic, even after I said, it's August 1st, it's 90 degrees, and I have no more room. He urged me. I figured out a way to do it. I lifted up the tail pack and put the folded up leather coat with gloves in the pockets under it. Then I replaced the tail pack. This raised it up a couple of inches and contributed to making the already top-heavy machine even more so. Each night when I took everything into the motel room, saddlebags, tail pack, tank bag, I had to deal with the leather coat. More than a little annoying, when my face and arms were so sunburned, I had to stop at a local drugstore to buy aloe. After 6 days of loading and unloading the awkward-to-place leather coat, I was ready to toss it. On this, the 7th day of the trip, I learned the value of his advice. Thanks, Cooch. I'm sure he was right about the other stuff too, but I can only stand so much preparation. By the way, let me give a piece of advice of my own. If you want to know how much space you need to carry stuff when you're motorcycle touring, the answer is all you can get. I'm going to talk more about this later. For right now, I just want to say I had saddlebags, tail pack, and a tank bag, and every inch of it was full. I recommend getting every kind of bag they make, and then try to find more places to carry stuff. I passed on the little tool bag they make that goes somewhere on the front end, depending on your bike, under the headlight, inside the windshield, etc. It seemed pointless to me. Most bikes come with a little toolkit, usually under the seat. Why would I carry that many tools? As it turns out, it would have been a perfect place for my digital still camera, freeing up some other space. Just get all of it. You'll use every bit and wish you had more. One more thing about the bags. When I decided to do this, I looked for hard bags. It seemed like a good idea to me. Lockable, weatherproof. I soon found very few companies make these, and those that do charge a bunch. And they're not really made for a specific machine, creating a mounting headache. Now that I've experienced soft bags, I think I like them better. I can't be sure because I don't have any experience with hard bags, but I must say, I like the idea of being able to quickly and easily bring everything into the motel room at night. It feels a lot more secure than leaving all of my possessions on the bike. There is a second advantage. You can force things into them. I specifically wanted to carry 2 full-face helmets in the bags. They don't really take up much space because you can stuff things inside of them. The saddlebags I had were Nelson Rig SB900 touring bags. They were the largest soft bags I could find, and because of the soft bag's ability to distort, I was able to carry a helmet in each of them. I really considered this important because New York State has a mandatory helmet law. Suppose I was traveling down Route 20 and came upon a drop-dead gorgeous girl who needed a ride. What was I supposed to do then? Carrying 2 helmets was mandatory. Yeah, guys think that way. No, it has never happened in my life, but I'm ready if it does.
Guys, the things they think of. Let's rejoin him on the way to Pennsylvania.
I'm going to get back to the philosophical side of this story, but first I want to talk about possibilities from a practical side. The bike I'm riding is a 1982 Suzuki GS650G. It has 4 cylinders, 4 carburetors, double overhead cams, 5-speed transmission, electric start, and a shaft drive. That's what the G stands for on the back of the GS650G. This entire genre of bikes were often referred to as UJMs, Universal Japanese Motorcycles. These machines preceded the exotic sport bikes and crotch rockets. All the Japanese companies made them, and they were available in a variety of configurations and displacements. There were chain-driven versions, there were 550s, 650s, 750s, 850s, and 1000s. They all fit a certain Japanese imitation of the classic British vertical twins, Triumphs, BSAs, Nortons, etc. Oh, they offered modern Japanese technology, but the style and layout was classic British. Probably because there were so many of them made and styles changed, they are incredible bargains. Bikes like this can be bought easily for between $500 and $1,000 depending on condition and size. They are extremely capable and parts are readily available. As a matter of fact, eBay has probably solved the parts problem for every motorcycle and car in the world. Literally anything can be found. Here's an example of what I mean. While I think of it, I want to take just a moment to give you guys a tip, or guys and gals for that matter, just a tip of something that proved real valuable to me. Service manuals. This is a 1982 motorcycle that's 22 years old. It's a 1982 Suzuki GS650G. 22 years old. Now, what are the chances of finding an owner's manual, an original owner's manual for this bike? It has been made in 22 years. And worse yet, what are the chances of finding a service manual, a factory service manual? Guess what? Found both of them on the internet. Found an absolutely mint condition original owner's manual from a fellow, I think that fellow was in Tennessee, and I found the service manual from a fellow in Canada. So inside of a week of looking on eBay and the internet, I came up with original with an original owner's manual and an original service manual. So you want to think about the internet. It can be real valuable. Being able to search the world via the internet instead of just your local bike shops is wonderful. I should mention motorcycle engineering has changed significantly over the years. You cannot expect one of these old bikes to match the ride, handling, and performance of modern machines. They were built before the advent of radial tires for motorcycles. The tires and wheels are very narrow. This does not mean they aren't good serviceable motorcycles, and as a matter of fact, I found this bike to be a continuous delight. I love its RPM-hungry characteristics. Perhaps because I raced two-stroke motorcycles for so many years, or maybe because I'm a snowmobiler. I love high RPM engines. For those who like to chug around at part throttle, low RPM engine speeds, this would not be the bike. Oh, don't get me wrong, you can ride around all day between 3,000 and 4,000 RPM and have adequate, if not inspiring, power and performance. Where this bike really lights up is when the tack needle swings past 5,000 RPM. Even at 70 miles per hour, performance between 6,000 and 9,000 RPM is astonishing for an engine of this size. My old BSA wouldn't have had a chance. I look for opportunities to run through the gears. An expressway on-ramp, third gear, 6,000, 7,000, 8,000, 9,000, 10,000. Pulling the clutch and snick the gear lever up, 2 clicks, synchronized throttle at bike speed, and motor along with satisfaction. I cannot tell you how impressed I am with this high RPM engine and how amazed I am at its reliability, especially considering the operating RPM. Pretty cool. What I'm trying to tell you is it doesn't take a lot of money to enjoy an adventure like this. Years ago we did an episode of Motorsports Unlimited showing you how you could acquire a boat, motor, and trailer for less than $1,000 and have all kinds of fun skiing and tubing. We called it Fun with Small Boats. For those who remember that episode, the same principles apply here. Often, UJMs, gee, I hate that name. I think it denigrates some really excellent, interesting machines. Let's call them PEMs, pre-exotic motorcycles. Anyway, it's often possible to barter for machines like this. They are not in high demand. Most people prefer cruiser style or crotch rockets. So for those on a budget who understand, it's not about what you're riding, it's about riding. These are excellent, superb performing, although not stylish, buys. Take my word for it. The adventure I'm on couldn't have been any better. Just check out this scenery, all on a bike that costs virtually nothing.
I see a snowmobile trail sign there. Boy, would this be a great area for snowmobiling.
When he reached the Pennsylvania state line, he stopped to tape a piece.
As you can see, I'm leaving New York State now, being welcomed to Pennsylvania. I decided not to go to Niagara Falls because it was just too darn cold. I started riding a little bit and, to a place and had breakfast, trying to decide if I was going to swing over to the falls, which would have added probably about 2 hours. It was 30 miles away, so 30 miles up, 30 miles back, 60 miles. That's a little over an hour of traveling time. Tape a piece at the falls. It would have been 2 hours added to it, and quite frankly, I was frozen. I kind of think it was a good decision now. It's actually warming up. Matter of fact, maybe it's time to take the coat off. And hopefully Pennsylvania's got a little bit warmer weather to offer. It's sunny now and even feels better.
Let's continue with him as he rides west towards Ohio.
I want to take a moment to interject something. While I believe you can't beat a motorcycle for sightseeing, this trip did not have to be done on a motorcycle. Let me be frank. Not everyone belongs on a motorcycle. It takes a certain kind of person that's a little difficult to define. If you're familiar with the television series Happy Days, you'll understand my explanation. Fonzie belongs on a motorcycle. Richie Cunningham does not. That doesn't mean Richie Cunningham isn't smart and capable, and in fact his types usually end up running the world's major corporations. But if you know the series, you know what I mean. The Fonz belongs on a motorcycle. Richie Cunningham does not. There are other alternatives. If you're mechanical, how about an open vintage British sports car? Maybe not an MGTC, my first glimpse at the world of sports cars at 9 years of age, but maybe an MGTD. It doesn't have to be a sports car either. Dan Pritchard, the mayor of Franklin Park, a Chicago suburb, enjoys wonderful road trip adventures in his Model A's. It actually helps the adventure if you're not absolutely positively sure you're going to get to where you're trying to go. If you're not mechanical, there are any number of cars that would successfully let you be involved with the environment, though I would say it has to be an open car. T-tops and sunroofs are not open cars. For the pure joy of a road trip, it's tough to beat a motorcycle. But one cannot ignore the accident statistics. They are grim. I wish we had a way to identify the Fonzies of the world. If only they rode, the numbers would be much better. Anyway, just because you're one of those who doesn't belong on a motorcycle and knows it, or bikes aren't your cup of tea, pick one of the alternatives. Stay off the interstates and enjoy the secondary highways and byways of America on a road trip.
It sure looks like fun. But what's this? Bill's on the interstate.
Small change in plans, folks. I am on the interstate now, not because I wanted to be, but going along Route 20 about 10 miles ago, came across a sign, said detour, bridge out 5 miles ahead. It put us up onto the interstate, and I said, okay, as long as I'm on the interstate now, I'm going to take it through Cleveland. You remember the trouble I had going through Cleveland on the way to New York. Well, I hope I've got it mastered now, because I'm about to try to go through Cleveland one more time. I might as well stay on 90 since we already brought us over to 90, and it'll bring it into the Cleveland interchange system, and I'll pick up 20 on the other side of Cleveland. It's weather's really getting nicer now. It's much nicer. It's actually sunny and warmer. Temperature isn't up as high as I'd like it to be, so I'm leaving the sweatshirt on and leaving the helmet on. But maybe by the time I get to the other side of Cleveland, maybe I can get rid of those two. Once again, still having a great time. It's a wonderful adventure, wonderful trip. I don't want to try to make the point now because of the highway rushing by and all that. But there's a reason that I'm doing this, not because I think all of you would be so interested in my trip, but I'm trying to inspire something in others, and we'll talk about that more as we go along. So, right now, the Suzuki is still running like a top. I am so impressed with this thing, I can't tell you. And we're continuing on west, going home.
Of course, you know Bill didn't shoot any footage on the interstate. He says it's pointless. It's all the same, everywhere in the country. Instead, he wanted to show you a little more of the beautiful upstate New York countryside.
I mentioned it was my intention to inspire people to think about the notion of a real road trip. As it turned out, I was the one who ended up being inspired. We'll get to all that in a little while. Right now, enjoy.
Just because Bill didn't tape any interstate riding doesn't mean he didn't comment on it in his journal. Janine?
One good thing about leaving New York was being able to put my helmet back in the saddlebag. We won't talk about helmet loss today. It muddies the water and requires in-depth discussion. I'll save it for another time, except to say, thank you, Abate. I was forced onto the interstate as I entered Ohio. There was a bridge out on Route 20, so traffic was detoured to the interstate for about 10 miles. I decided I might just as well stay on it for the next couple of hours because I was going to jump on the interstate to pass through Cleveland anyway. It was awful as always. On the interstate, you just lay your ears back and fly. You keep your eyes focused on the road in front of you and remain conscious of the traffic around you. It's nerve-wracking and very little fun. At the speed you're traveling, things can happen very quickly, and you better be on top of everything. What did that sign say? I asked myself. Milled road surface ahead. I answered myself. What could that mean? I pondered. In a few moments, I had my answer. I dropped my speed down to 70 in anticipation of what the sign was calling my attention to. I encountered the milled surface at about the same time I figured it out in my head. This is when they claw the top surface of the highway off in advance of resurfacing. Unfortunately, the claw lines the machine gouges into the surface are never straight. They are about 1/4 inch deep and 1/2 inch spacing. They are wavy in appearance when viewed from a motorcycle seat, looking ahead at 70 miles per hour. I'm sure I don't have to tell you that the motorcycle sees the waviness and tries to follow the grooves. It kind of stopped my heart, but I know better than to make any sudden move with the throttle or brakes. Let's see, I thought. If this were a 200-pound motocrosser, I'd yank up on the bars and gas it to lighten the front end, giving the front tire less influence on the bike. But this is a 500-pound top-heavy touring bike with a 180-pound, I hope, rider and 200 pounds of gear. There won't be much lightening the front end. I gently rolled off the throttle slightly, and it started to get worse. I eased back into it. The surface seemed to like 70 to 72 miles per hour, and the bike seemed to be happiest there too. I guess I was the only one of the triad who was uncomfortable. For 14 miles, I held my breath. I was very happy when I finally saw the good pavement ahead. This was about the only thing interesting that happened on the interstate. I was happy to get off of it on the other side of Cleveland and return to Route 20.
Well, that didn't sound like much fun. As a matter of fact, as soon as Bill got to the other side of Cleveland and back on Route 20, he stopped to comment.
Well, during the past couple of hours, I've learned one thing for sure about touring on a motorcycle. Stay off the interstate highway system. It was terrible. There's no question about it. You make good time. You just roll off the miles. And matter of fact, for the past couple hours, I have not dropped below 6,000 RPM. Between 6,000 and 7,000 RPM for 2 hours. Problem is, it's not enjoyable. You really don't get to see anything. And actually, I'm a little bit surprised at the kind of time I've been making on Route 20. When I left Buffalo and actually entered Pennsylvania, I found at least 3 out of 10 little towns that I went through had fests going on. It was kind of cool, kind of slowing down because they had the police sort of guiding traffic around the fest in the downtown, what they might call a downtown area. And it was kind of cool watching all the activities and all that. And you would think that you really wouldn't make much time at all because of slowing down for things like that and for the little towns and everything. But as a matter of fact, I actually make great time. It's not really that. It doesn't slow you down as much as you might think it does. And somehow, cruising along with the hammer down for an hour and a half or 2 hours, you think gee, I'm at the other side of the United States now. You're really not. You don't make that much more time. It's kind of surprising. I have to sit down and think about that a little bit, but I just wanted to share my observations with you about this, about using the internet. I've never felt that way in a car, surprisingly enough. There's a little something different about touring on a motorcycle. It's about being involved with your environment. It's about being able to look right and left and see what's going on and smell the smells and feel the air and all that. It's quite different than the car driving experience. So my feeling is, as a matter of fact, I've talked to a couple of other bikers about this while I've been doing this touring, and most of them avoid the interstate because it's just not enjoyable.
After treating himself to a dairy twist, he was ready to leave.
By the way, I should also add before I go that I'm in Overton, Ohio. This is about 90 miles, 85 or 90 miles east of Toledo, and I want to make Toledo by tonight. It's right now just about 5:30, so I should be rolling into Toledo. I'm guessing around 7:30, something like that. So that'll be nice to finish the day off like this. And this is going to be on Route 20, so I'm going to be able to enjoy the little towns on the way and all that. But it is time to get going.
Before Bill actually left the dairy twist, he decided to jot down a few more notes in his journal. Janine?
Literally, within 1,000 yards of getting off the interstate, I stopped at another of the charming ma and pa places that dot the non-interstate highways and byways of America. This one was called Dairy Twist. I wanted to collect my thoughts and think about what I just experienced. I paid very close attention while I was on the interstate to see if I could determine what I hated about it. Certainly, the interstate highway system is attractive. The landscaping is always pleasant. The signs are in a nice shade of green with off-white lettering, easy on the eyes, and quite understandable. The interstate is safer. There are no intersections, nothing to run into on the side of the road, such as telephone poles or trees, etc. So if it's pleasant to look at and safer to travel on, and you can make better time, why do I dislike them in a car and hate them on a motorcycle? I'm sure some of you are thinking I've got an attitude about the interstate highway system because of what it did to my parents. Let me say this. I believe in 1,000 years, people will look back on the interstate highway system and hold it with the same reverence that we, today, hold the Great Wall of China. I think it is that significant an achievement. I think its value to America is beyond measure. It shrunk this large landmass country and made all of its resources available to everyone. It contributed greatly to creating the American automobile industry and it becoming the economic engine of our wealthy nation. So why don't I like it? It's a little hard to explain, but I'm going to try. 40 years ago, I was planning on wood paneling the living room of my home. The paneling I really liked was Iberian elm, but it was $48 a sheet. Next to it in the lumberyard was something they called photographic paneling. It looked every bit as good and was $5 a sheet. I liked them both equally, so why should I spend so much more for real wood? My dad told me, and he was a guy who liked to save a buck, "Son, if you buy the photographic stuff, you'll end up taking it down or painting it in 2 years. Natural wood has endless grain patterns, and no 2 square inches are the same. One sheet of photographic paneling is identical to the stack next to it of real wood paneling. But remember, you're not putting up one sheet, you're putting up dozens. The sameness of the photographic paneling will soon tire the eye." My dad was a very sharp guy. I bit the bullet and bought the real wood. It's still up today. Okay. I know I'm trying to explain why cruising the interstate highway system on a motorcycle is like a Chinese water torture. Here it is. What makes the interstate highway system valuable is its sameness. Regardless of where you are in the nation, the signs are consistent, the landscaping is consistent, and the road surfacing is consistent. Perfect for commercial use. Unfortunately, for pleasure travel, they're awful. On a motorcycle, you have to be heads up all the time. You can't take it for granted that there won't be chunks of rubber from an exploded semi-tire littering the road. A minor thump when a car hits a large chunk is an annoyance. It can be fatal on a motorcycle. you must pay attention to the roadway all the time. Essentially, you end up looking at what seems like the same piece of concrete hour after hour. You may make better time on the interstate, but it sure seems longer. I think the human mind constantly needs something to munch on. On Route 20 or Route 66 or many others, the scenery is ever-changing. Around every bend and over every hill, the scene in front of you is always different. Little things like sign painting. On this trip to upstate New York from Chicago, I must have seen the works of thousands of sign painters, from sales in stores to elaborate artwork identifying a tavern. Ever-changing, no two alike. How about landscaping? Every homeowner has a different idea of how he wants his property to look. I must have seen tens of thousands of different approaches. The sites available on the non-interstate highway system are a wonderful, ever-changing tapestry, a feast for the eye and mind. The sites on the interstate highway system are akin to photographic wood paneling, pleasant enough at first sight, but devoid of life. It has been said that all man's troubles stem from the fact that he cannot sit in a darkened room and do nothing. To me, motorcycling on the interstate is sitting in a darkened room and doing nothing. The sameness hour after hour is intolerable. I've spoken to a number of experienced touring riders since this trip, and they all reject the interstates. It's great for getting someplace in a hurry, but it's a terrible ride.
Bill arrived in Toledo after dark and decided to tape a piece there when he got up in the morning. Let's join him.
As I gather up my stuff to get ready for the day's ride, I'd like to get back to what I unexpectedly learned from this trip. It is true I'll never be able to race motorcycles again, nor do any of the physically demanding things I once prided myself on in my youth. But what I discovered was I can enjoy some pleasure as I age that I couldn't do in my youth. When I started this trip, I questioned why I thought I could do something at 61 that I couldn't do at 21. The answer is, there are many things you can enjoy as you age that you couldn't when you were young. Youth brings with it an impatience and urgency that prevents one from seeing things that are often right under our nose. I took painstaking effort to contrast the motorcycle trip I took when I was 21 and this one at 61. I detailed what defeated us on the first one, and all of that was true. But there is a more subtle truth. The fact is, even if we had no mechanical difficulty, even if we had saddlebags and windshields, even if we did get to our destination, we would not have experienced the joy I did on this one. I wasn't ready. I was ready to build an empire and take on the world, but I wasn't ready to be seduced by a lovely tree or appreciate the almost magical sense of motion across the landscape on a motorcycle. I've had time to give all of this some thought. The somewhat solitary nature of motorcycling encourages that. I've concluded life has seasons. There is a season to be born, a season to grow, a season to compete, a season to build. But it doesn't end there. There is also a season to harvest. Each season has its share of joy and restrictions. The yoke of impatience and urgency having been lightened opens bright new possibilities. But I think one must be open to them. I think what I gained more than anything from this trip is an appreciation for my age, an understanding of my new reality. It's not something to fear, it's something to embrace and examine the new possibilities for joy and pleasure you were never able to see before. As difficult as it may be to believe, at 61, I just experienced one of the best summers of my life. Pretty cool.
Definitely a little bit cold out there this morning, folks. Hold on. All right, I just finished loading the bike this morning. I'm in Toledo, Ohio. Actually in Holland, Ohio, which is a western suburb of Toledo. Probably a little something like Elmwood Park is to Chicago, right on the border. Outside, we've got the expressway. I'm going to jump on it for about 5 or 10 miles and get off at the Route 20 West exit and continue. This is the final leg of the, I shouldn't say final leg, final segment, final day, better way to say it, final day of my my little adventure. It's Sunday. It's interesting. Normally, when these things are over, when a trip is over, you're really anxious to get home, and I am. I'm really anxious. I miss my dogs, and hopefully they miss me. On the other hand, this riding on Route 20 has been so enjoyable that wouldn't bother me if I rode and rode and rode. So yes, I'm looking forward to getting home, but I'm also looking forward to this last day of riding.
Let's ride along with Bill in upstate New York as he makes his way to Indiana.
That's right, folks. Patty said footage from upstate New York while riding to Indiana. The landscape there is so pretty, I wanted to show you as much as I could. By the way, do you remember at the gorge when I was going through my reminder notes? There was one item I didn't want to tell you about lest it jinx the trip. I think it's okay now. I think I'm out of the woods. The tires on this bike are original. That's right, 22-year-old tires on a motorcycle road trip. My friends all went nuts. Are you crazy to risk something like that? Motorsports Unlimited cameraman Chuck Itzenthaler had a regular hissy fit over it. My theory was I'd already put 2,000 around-town miles on the bike before the trip, and they hadn't lost a single pound of air, and the balance was perfect. I didn't want to create a problem by over-preparing. Chuck was adamant. Sustained high-speed running is liable to disintegrate those old tires. I'd like to say I was proving them wrong, except I must admit, when I was wiggling down the milled surface interstate at 70 miles an hour for 14 miles in Ohio, I was wishing I took their advice. Maybe I don't have this wisdom of age thing all sorted out yet.
While we were showing you upstate New York footage and listening to Bill's comments on his adventure, he arrived at the Indiana state line.
It's taken the better part of the morning, but here we are, Indiana, as we continue the final segment of the final day, I should say, of this little adventure. I must say, as I stand here, the temperature feels fine, but it sure feels cold when you're on the bike. As a matter of fact, it seems to me we've got rain threatening the whole way this morning. Thus far, not a drop of rain. And again, as I stand here, it seems like it's fine. But as I look, I don't know if the audience can see or not, as I look that way, sure looks like heavy clouds. So hopefully we're not going to run into rain. Doesn't really make any difference. Like I say, we're on the final day now, and I'm kind of looking forward to getting home.
While Bill continues west to Illinois, we listen again to some of his observations about this trip while looking at upstate New York's rolling countryside.
I can't believe it. After a 15-year absence, I've rediscovered motorcycling. I thought those days were gone forever, but I found a whole new way to enjoy them. And what a rush. I can hardly wait to see what's around life's next corner. I hope you see my point.
While you've been watching upstate New York footage, Bill made his way to Illinois.
And look at what a perfect day it's turned out to be. Ran into some rain in Angola, Indiana. Not really enough to stop and put the rain suit on. As soon as I got west of South Bend, it turned into a gorgeous day, and it's absolutely beautiful right now. Hey, guess what? It looks like I'm going to make it. Matter of fact, if I hurry, maybe I can still get the boat out today.
Boat? Isn't he sunburned enough? Guys just never stop playing. Let's take one final peek at upstate New York.
Well, I hope you can see on television how steep this is. It's a serious steep. And they have signs at the top of the hill that says trucks use low gear. You know you're in for a steep one. Now I'm completely rolled off on the throttle and maintaining 55 miles an hour. And now picking up a little speed. Yeah, this is really steep.
Guess what, folks? He made it!
5 states, 8 days, and over 2,000 miles. Full report tomorrow. Right now, I'm going to play with my dogs.
Oh, they're so cute. That was Princey and Tiny, happy to see Bill back home, and just in time because we're out of time, with only enough left to acknowledge the fine work of our award-winning production team, including Chuck Itzenthaler, Sue Cassanda, our webmaster, Frank Barbalace, Rena Borwitz, and Tom McGrady. Special thanks to JBTV's Jerry Bryant. Music is created for us by independent artists Roger Pauley and Jerry Herbert. Of course, we have to take a moment to thank the stars of this edition of Motorsports Unlimited. Patty Borwitz, Janine Lauschat, and our host, Bill Wildt. Me, I'm Samantha Bentley, a little bit jealous of Bill because it was quite an adventure and gave me a lot to think about. Thanks for watching. See you next week.
This program made possible in part by support from J.C. Whitney & Company, located just off I-80 at the Utica exit in LaSalle, Illinois.
This program made possible in part by support from the Chicagoland Toys for Tots Motorcycle Parade held on Western Avenue in Chicago, the first Sunday in December.
This program made possible in part by support from Jimmy's Red Hots, located on Grant Avenue and Pulaski Road in Chicago.
Motorsports Unlimited is produced by Bill Wildt, president of the Motorsport Advancement Crusade.
This program made possible in part by support from ABC Auto Parts, located on Ashland Avenue at 138th Street in Blue Island, Illinois.
This program made possible in part by support from Copy That, located in the County Farm Plaza at County Farm Road and Army Trail Road in Carroll Stream, Illinois.
This program made possible in part by support from Bridgestone Firestone and your local Bridgestone Firestone tire retailers.
This program made possible in part by support from PB Food Products, located on 47th Street at Western Avenue in Chicago, Illinois. Motorsports Unlimited was created to raise public consciousness, understanding, and appreciation of the motorsport community and their activities. You can contact us by email at msutv.com, or you can write to Motorsport, P.O. Box 66242, Chicago, Illinois, 60666. We enjoy hearing from our audience. Please let us know what you think.
Next week on Motorsports Unlimited, it's the 2005 spring edition of Chevy Vet Fest. It's live on tape from world-famous McCormick Place on Chicago's magnificent lakefront. Join us as we close out the winter car show season in spectacular fashion with great cars and, of course, pretty girls. They make everything better all next week on Motorsports Unlimited.
So that's it, another edition of Motorsports Unlimited and the lovely ladies of motorsports. And be with us next week because we'll have something real exciting. Bill Wildt's going to have the lovely ladies, and just about anything can happen right here on Motorsports Unlimited. Every week at this time, we bring you the best in motorsports. So be seeing ya. Bye-bye. And keep on rocking.